All right, let's go to this conversation now. The race for the ANC leadership is heating up. Various leaders have put their names in the hat for the party's top positions. Just recently, the Ethekwini Region announcing its support for Zweli Mkhize as president and Paul Mashatile as his deputy. But these aren't the only names that we've seen in the public domain. And of course, a lot has been said about what exactly, is going to unfold in December. And to try and help us make sense of that, we have political analyst Rebone Tau and Reputation's First Group Managing Director Tshepo Matseba, who are going to be helping us try and make sense of what we're seeing. Thank you so much for your time. As you can see, these are the question marks that we are seeing here. I'll start with you, Rebone. There's been quite a lot that has been said about what may happen when it comes to, the presidency. But right now, given what we've seen come out of KwaZulu-Natal, particularly that Ethekwini region, that significant region, yesterday releasing a statement saying that it's backing Zweli Mkhize despite Ward 32 backing Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. How significant is this?
KwaZulu-Natal finds itself in a very difficult position, and I think which is similar to 2017, but maybe a bit worse this time around. Reason being, for presidential, you've got 3 candidates. For the Secretary General, you've got also Mdumiseni Ntuli, who seems to be getting support outside of his home province, KwaZulu-Natal. Now, you also are aware that there are discussions that there was a meeting that took place in Nkandla, and whereby the former President Jacob Zuma persuaded some from the RT faction to support Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma for the position of President of the ANC. You can't take that away from what it might do to the Zweli Mkhize campaign. It is going to damage the Zweli Mkhize campaign. While there is that pronouncement, there is also the issue of that coming from the provincial conference of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, which by Mdumiseni Ntuli was the secretary who lost at that conference, still has a portion of branches that, as we speak, there are branches that are nominating Mdumiseni Ntuli for Secretary General. So that means that they will not come as a province solid behind the name of Zweli Mkhize. There will be those that who are supporting Mdumiseni Ntuli, which that faction is aligned to President Ramaphosa.
So then, listening to you, it doesn't sound like you then agree with some of the reports that are suggesting that some insiders within, the former health minister's campaign are suggesting that the province will follow suit in, after what Ethekwini did and actually back him as the presidential candidate.
This is a conference of branches, not a conference of the region. Yes, they would say that they are called consulting branches in terms of this, but also that was a strategic move from their side because of their back is against the wall in terms of the Zuma factor, which I've later spoken about. Because remember that going to this provincial conference, some went to even Nkandla, some of these leaders, to go and meet former President Jacob Zuma and perceived the faction of Sihlezi Kalala Mdumiseni as a faction that is anti former President Jacob Zuma. And they won this conference also using that card. And now that same person is saying, I'm not supporting the candidate of Zweli Mkhize, I prefer Nkosazana. But the province, I can tell you, will not come to this conference solid and united.
Tshepo, this of course is still some of the names. There might be more, and this is just one of those, of some of the names that we've seen in the public domain. I wonder, though, how much of a complication does this pose for the Women's League, for example, that has been pushing for a woman president?
Yeah, look, the ANC, this organization is an organization of many contradictions. What you have there presents difficulties not only for the Women's League, but also difficulties for a particular faction of the ANC. So they're not going to the battle united. But we know that historically, within the ANC, you couldn't campaign openly. From President Mbeki to President Jacob Zuma, up to in recent time, Mutlante, you would hear, for example, that there are discussions behind the scenes and the branches will make these decisions and the branches would pronounce. But this time around, there's a culture shift, a shocking culture shift, to be honest, for those who have been following the ANC for many, many years, in that people are beginning to talk openly and directly about their preferred candidates, but also the candidates themselves are actually openly on screen, on camera, saying, I'm available, and they raise their hands. And we look at Lindo Sisulu. I mean, she raised her hands far ahead of time. Whether or not there's a degree of influence to a level that she would make it to the presidency of the ANC this time around is a different story. But the fact that they are going to as two females, ununited, and additionally as disagreeing within the same sort of forces or the same alignment, you know, they already have serious problems.
Let's talk about the optics, Tshepo. Just a second, Rebone. Let's talk about the optics of what you're saying. I'll give you a second, Rebone. We're seeing in Gauteng, for example, the PEC almost charting a way forward as to how the province is to go. But we now then see reports suggesting that others are not backing President Cyril Ramaphosa, as the PEC in Gauteng is suggesting. Others in some of the branches are saying they are going with Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, while there's also reports that are suggesting that Zweli Mkhize may also be one of those that some of the branches in Gauteng look to. So what are the optics when we are seeing some of the branches saying that they're essentially defying what the PEC is saying?
Yeah, it sends a very strong signal that it's an open playing field, and that any of the candidates actually in the running, and they can actually make it, except that they're creating a space for the dominant force to occupy the space even further, to create a further gap, in the sense that, you know, you were hoping that when they go into these battles, at least at the PEC level and at the branch level, regional level, at least, that there's some kind of consistency. And as I say, it comes across like a very divided organization, an organization of many, many complex contradictions.
Rebone?
I think on the Women's League, there's a difference from 2017 to this conference. The Women's League was disbanded, which was in 2017 behind Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, which was led by Bathabile Dlamini, who is also from KwaZulu-Natal. But what is interesting, if you look at the composition of the current Women's League, they are behind President Ramaphosa. And why I say this, the current coordinator of the Women's League, Marupen Ramokgopa, is actually the advisor of President Ramaphosa at the Union Building of International Relations. Then you go to Mambaleka, who we remember that just on the eve in 2017 said, I'm putting my weight behind President Ramaphosa. She didn't support Nkosazana. So with that disbandment, it has really affected the position of Dr. Dlamini-Zuma that she had in 2017.
I suppose then it also goes to some of the questions and the concerns that were raised by some about the status of the leagues and what this means then going into December. Gentlemen, let's talk about this, please. There's a flood for the deputy presidency. And Rebone, I see you are smiling because I think you know where I'm headed with this one. There's a flood, and it looks like a lot of people are heading towards this particular position. Is there something that we should be reading to this? Because you think of some of the reports suggesting that the deputy president is aiming to go for the highest office. You think of, you know, some backing Paul Mashatile, Ronald Lamula, some saying it's time for fresh blood, young blood. You're thinking of Mamuluko Kubai. There's quite a number of names that are coming for the deputy position. Is there something we should be seeing here, Tshepo?
Yeah, I mean, the ANC is now being labeled an organization of ageists or very old people who have been occupying senior positions for decades, and they're not willing to let go. And so names such as Ronald Lamola come out as interesting, but also come out with support of almost popular support of South Africans with the quest and the need to see change and transformation at that level of leadership. And then, of course, I wouldn't take for granted the strength and the capability that has been demonstrated by Paul Mashatile over a period of time. He has built his name for a period of time. He has delivered, but he also been handed an opportunity to sit in the Secretary General's office.
Despite some saying, though, that salaries are still not paid.
Yeah, and as I said, it's an organization of many contradictions. And I wouldn't say, I think the ANC holistically should take accountability for its failures, including himself, that is Mashatile. But in terms of where this trajectory is going, it seems like between himself and Ronald, he's probably the strongest, probably the most preferred candidate. And that's the game. But the ANC is unpredictable. I remember a few years ago when we watched Deputy President Mabuza and how things turn around, the surprises that he's able to yield, or he was able to yield. We wait to see if he has a wild card somewhere on his pocket. But fascinating to see the strength of a proposition, of a more youthful proposition. But even though some people who have supported the youth before, like Julius Malema, seem to be now turning around to support the Mahashuli.
Interesting. You talk about a wild card. One thinks about unity. I'm backing Comrade Unity in 2017, and it all surprised us. Rebone, what are you reading into this? Because it seems we have a lot of contestation for the deputy position than we have for the top office.
I think what is interesting about this, and I'm looking at it from a factional point of view. If you look at Lamola, Kensani Kubai, Senzo Mchune, they're all in the same core. Now, if you understand politics, you know that the center is not holding in the CR22 faction because they can't find each other. You can go back to as far as the TM's era and Jacob Zuma's era. There the center was holding. It was clear you didn't have people from the same faction contesting each other. I'll give an example. You go back to 2012. Yeah, under the Kgalema slate, you had Tokyo Khwale and Matthews Posa contesting each other for deputy president. So this is what we're seeing, a repeat of that. But then, what is also interesting about this is that if you know the Premier League, and a lot of people don't know the real Premier League, before Isma Khashoggi and them came in, and if you know the original Premier League, none of them were associated with the Guptas.
Are you going to tell us the real Premier League?
There was a Premier League, the original one, where you had people like Zweli Mkhize when he was still the Premier and the chair of KwaZulu-Natal. You had Paul Mashatile, you had Didi Mabuza, and all of them, the three of them, were never associated with the Guptas. If you look at what then transpired later to become from Premier League to a formation of the RT. And if you look at that RT again, Didi Mabuza dropped them in 2017. Paul Mashatile was not going with the RT. Zweli Mkhize was also going alone. So that shows you that it is very interesting that even now they are still now contesting each other. They can't seem to be finding each other going to December.
Very briefly, how is the Phala saga going to continue be a cloud that hangs above the president going into December?
Yeah, so it will be very difficult for the president to have any conversation, both domestically and internationally, without the question of Phala being asked until he chooses to speak out himself and explain what has transpired and put the facts forward voluntarily, without too much pressure being placed on him. And up until this point, he has not come out to speak openly about what has transpired, and therefore he creates more space for speculation and more space for pressure. But you know, knowing the ANC, the many leaders went through the ANC with massive scandals behind them, and therefore we don't expect that it will tarnish any of his chances of going for the second term. If any, the second term may be impacted by other factors other than Phala.
Rebone, 20 seconds. Digital vibes. Can it hurt Mkhize?
We're waiting to see. He has challenged the SIU over the weekend, and we'll see whether will he be charged, because that also is something that is hanging over his head going to December, because if he gets charged, he's automatically out of the race based on the Rule 25.70 of the ANC.
All right, let's see how it unfolds. I suspect we are still going to be having a lot of conversations about this, because it really begs the question as to what are we going to see unfold. I mean, one thinks about it's only 5 years, comrades, you know, what those words that Ace Magashule said famously. And it sounds like the past few years have been about the 5 years and to ensure that they come back. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all unfolds. But thank you so much for that. Political analyst Rebone Tau and Reputation's first Group Managing Director Tshepo Matseba, just helping us make sense of some of what we've been seeing happen around the race to December, and of course some strong views there. Let's then move on to this. National Assembly Speaker Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula says she is considering the objections of the DA and the EFF on the appointment of Professor Richard Calland to the independent panel of experts to investigate if there are any grounds to begin an impeachment inquiry against President Cyril Ramaphosa over the Phala Phala saga.